here is my first Lego Technic 1:8 scale car in quite a few years now. It's the model of a real-life, custom-modified 1989 Toyota Corolla GTS that has been modified for off-road racing and called the AWDrola, or all-wheel drive Rolla. So I was just looking at models to build online, looking at different cars, and came across a picture of this custom build, and once I saw it, I knew I had to build it. It's got some pretty cool stuff going on. But for now, this is what it looks like. Pop-up headlights, bar on the front, roof rack, so for manual functions, we've got an opening hood with a really basic prop. We've got opening doors with a little latch mechanism. And opening trunk with nothing to keep it open, so it just falls shut. Interior is pretty basic. Honestly, I think I'm past caring too much about the interiors of 1:8 scale cars. That's really not the interesting part of the build, so I tried to make it vaguely presentable, but not too detailed. There would probably be room for some kind of back seat, and the real car would have originally had one, but even though I didn't check, I doubt the rear seat survived the transition to Desert Racer, so I didn't install one. So a real 89 Corolla GTS would have had some kind of strut front suspension, and I'm not quite sure what in the rear, probably something independent. But in the real life build, they took the rear solid axle from a Toyota Corolla all-track wagon, which was an all-wheel drive Corolla variant that I guess was able to be modified to work. So it's actually got a solid rear axle. And then on the front, I don't quite remember what this exact Corolla should have had. Actually, I think the build used suspension from a RAV4, so it would be a McPherson strut on the original. But in my reading, I discovered this interesting Toyota Super Strut front suspension design, which is a modified McPherson strut. And it was in some similar cars around that time, so I decided to try building it. So, a fair bit of suspension travel in the front. You can see up here the top of the shocks are angled back quite a bit, which I guess looks realistic and maybe in some setups helps you have caster angle. Then if I flip up the car, you can see there's a bit more going on under here. That is broken, so ignore that. We've got two bottom links. Ideally they should be kind of, well, it's kind of a virtual pivot. The real pivot is between the two. So the one goes just like that, normal link, and then we have a trailing link. So that one's locating it in this direction, that one's locating it fore and aft. And then on top, it's essentially a McPherson strut. So we have the strut up there supporting it, and if you look back here, there's no upper wishbone because it's a McPherson strut based suspension. But in order to have some better control, we have this extra linkage. So this is rigidly attached to the shock absorbers, and then it has an extra link here. So that, I believe the idea is, without that link connected, we can have a lot of camber change. With the link connected, we no longer have that. It's tying it in there. It's not the most sturdy thing. This connection here is a bit forced and tends to fall apart, as it has on this side, but it's a pretty interesting suspension concept. And then on the rear, we've just got a 4-link live axle, triangulated links on the top, other links on the bottom, and some long shocks. If this model flips back up, I can show you the rear suspension travel. The wheel is popping off. So a fun function on a car like this is that you get to have the pop-up headlights, which are always fun. So I've got them motorized here. So down. and then back up. So with the hood open, you can see the mechanism for it. We've got a power functions media motor tucked right behind there, driving this shaft. That rubber band is supposed to be on that bush, but it's a little bit of a pain to get on. It seems to be working, so I'll leave it. Then it drives this micromotor pulley, which is just giving you a tiny bit of gear reduction in the space available. Then it runs these two linear actuators that then run the headlights. Didn't have a lot of space to play with, but it seems to work pretty good. So the next function to show is steering, which admittedly it works really badly. So we got something skipping there, lift it up. And it's got a working steering wheel. So if I flip it up, it's run by this power functions media motor. That drivetrain's going to the steering wheel. This one goes to this small linear actuator, which controls the actual steering linkage. I guess my main problem is that that linear actuator's clutch tends to slip. But anyways, that's okay, I guess. It's not like I was going to drive this much anyways. Next up, we've got a sort of pneumatic parking brake simulated. So you can see the handbrake moving up and down. You can hear the compressor running. And then it's also hooked up to like an actual brake. So if I run it again, it's an auto valve. So one motor is moving that valve back and forth and running the pump. So right now we should be free. Yeah, now if I put my brake on, the beam there moves a bit and presses a rubber part against the inside of this drum. Then I can turn it off again. Oops, sorry, going the wrong way. There we go. And it moves more freely again. I didn't love how I had to put my drums so far inboard, but that was the only way I could get them to work with the planetary hubs. And I really wanted to use the planetary hubs for, well, to give it a better chance of actually driving. Alright, now we can get into the actual drivetrain functions. So I'm probably not actually going to be able to show it driving on this scenic but irregular lump of rock here. So that'll probably be filmed back at base. But for now I'll show we got two power functions large motors, which... Okay, so now that we've got past the engine, I'll go for a bit of a drivetrain overview. So we've got these two power functions large motors, which are hard coupled together. They're going into... You can just kind of see it in here. Maybe you can't. There's a driving ring in there. That's our clutch, which is a function that I was going to get to later, but maybe I could just show it now. So it's this media motor here running this shaft, which moves that in there. Then we go into our transmission, which I'll talk about later. So then the transmission feeds into a 28-tooth heavy-duty differential you can see down there. So it's got a small driving ring going into the end of it, going into a 24-tooth clutch gear up at the top. And then also back, which then meshes with another 24-tooth clutch back here. And then we've got two 24-tooths up here, with basically the effect being when that clutch gear is locked, it acts as a central differential lock. I might have to take some footage while I'm taking this apart. So that's controlled. Central differential lock on, central differential lock off. Controlled by that medium motor through a clutch. So I'll leave it off for now. So yeah, one big priority for me was trying to keep as realistic of a drivetrain as possible, in that everything is transverse that should be transverse. So the motors, the engine, the transmission, the central differential, all of that is transverse, and only after that This is built so dense and on top of each other, I can't really show it, but we've got some bevel gears that then transfer the drive to a longitudinal drive shaft, which then comes back here. And then, just for fun, I threw in a Torsen limited slip rear differential. So, it's got the two worm gears in there, geared to other worm gears, with the effect being that it'll never slip and send all the power to one wheel. The worm gears can be back driven from the wheels, but not from the axle. Doesn't really matter in a model like this that's heavy and doesn't have problems with traction, but it's fun to add, and it's big enough that I could. Also just happy with the use of these old Bionicle or something parts, just getting kind of the rounded shape of an axle. So now we come to the transmission, which might be my favorite function. It's a 6+ reverse, it's technically 6+2 reverse, but we ignore one of them. Transmission, controlled by this joystick here. And, best of all, that joystick is mirrored in the cab. So first, second, actually no, I think this is reverse. Then first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So the way it works, basically we've got a 3+ reverse transmission here, and then a 2-speed here. The 2-speed has a pretty small ratio change. It's actually going directly into, that's the central differential I talked about before, right up there. It's got the 28-tooth side on the one end, and then the other end is in the driving ring into a 24-tooth clutch gear. Basically making it so the differential has two inputs, 24-tooth and 28-tooth, which are then being driven by 24 and 20 through the 2-speed. And the 2-speed is controlled by the forward-backward motion of the lever. So that'd be like a 1 to 2 shift, or a 3 to 4 shift. Then over here we've got our 3+R. So we've got reverse, where it's being driven, well, I won't get into the details now. Reverse, then first, second, and third. Both of these transmissions are controlled by power function servo motors up here through these chain drivetrains. So the one downside is that, well, okay, no. So the 3+R is basically the same as moving your transmission left and right in a manual transmission car. So it doesn't actually put you into gear because your 2-speed is still in neutral, but it's kind of pre-selecting for which range you want to be in. Do you want to be in the reverse range, the 1-2 range, the 3-4 range, or the 5-6 range? But I don't actually have detent, so you kind of have to watch and know where you're stopping to know if, like, being in the reverse slot is easy, you go all the way over here. Being in the 5-6 is easy, all the way over here. But the middle two require a delicate touch. I notice I'm using a Moldkin controller, which has pretty granular control, which is exactly what I need for a joystick that has to stop in 4 positions, when the PF servo is traditionally a 3 position. Anyways, yeah, I'm really happy with how that worked out. It's simulating a real manual. You've got the right joystick doing the right motions, and it's moving the joystick in there, which I think is a great touch. And it's, I don't know, I think relatively mechanically simple. Unfortunately, it does tend to skip in some gears. Reverse was not working for me when I tested it the other day, and I believe 5 and 6 didn't have enough torque. You'll be seeing a driving part in the video, though. Alright, here's some footage from the future. I have just ripped off pretty well all the bodywork so we can get a better view of what's actually going on. So transmission, so that servo there, and that servo there. This one here is geared to this linkage, which then rotates there. The other one has gearing through that 24-tooth gear, then through that universal joint to rotate the joystick left-right. Steering we've seen. I've now got the model even more stripped down so we can follow the drivetrain a bit more clearly. We've got our 2 large motors that are both geared up to this axle here. We've then got our clutch, which is run by one of those medium motors, so it just disconnects it from the main drivetrain here. That gearing comes down to here and runs these 24-tooth gears. Oh, and also, from the initial L motors, we've got that 8-tooth that's always driving this 28, which is always driving this 8, which is always running the piston engine. So no matter what the clutch or the drivetrain is doing, the engine will be running. Anyways, then from these 24-tooths, we go into our first gearbox. It just drives the input shaft there. And then from there, we come to our second gearbox. That gearbox is driving, I believe it's driving the axle there with that driving ring on it. Anyway, this here. So it won't do anything until that driving ring engages. Then when it does engage, it drives one side of this differential. You can see that one's locked on both sides to this 24-tooth clutch, so it's just two closely spaced ratios to drive that central differential. It's the central one. Then from that we have two outputs. One of them is going to the front wheels. So the 22 gear up there driving the front differential from that output. And the other output goes to this axle, which runs these 24-tooth gears, which then drives this 12-tooth and 20-tooth bevel, which then comes up to this 12-tooth here, which then runs to the rear to run the rear axle, right down here. And then the central differential lock is based on this driving ring here. So essentially it is, what's it doing? Yeah, we've got that. This 24-tooth is just always attached to the differential housing, and it then runs another 24-tooth clutch gear, which can be engaged with this driving ring to lock the output axle here through that to the case here, which essentially just locks the differential. So these have to rotate together. If I unlock it, then they can do whatever. This is, I think, the first time I've ever seen someone use three 24-tooth clutch gears in a row, all using their clutch function. It's fairly satisfying to get that to happen. Alright, time for driving tests. Here's reverse. Yep, it's reversing. And then we're going to shift into first. And second. Let me just find it here. There's second. There's third. And driving third and backwards a little. There we go. Fourth. Fifths. Definitely some bad noises coming, but it's moving, I guess. Oops. And sixths. Very bad noises. Some movement. Okay, we're in first and we're driving. Now we're going to put the clutch out. And now we're not driving. Put the clutch back in. And we drive again. So that's the clutch action. So now I'm driving the car. And I can stop all power going to the rear wheel because the central differential is unlocked. Now if I run the central differential lock, that will no longer be the case. The rear wheel has to move. Now now, just to demonstrate the torque and rear differential, I still have the central differential locked, and I put this wheel back on, so now that's not going to rotate because it's on the ground. So if I had an open differential in the rear, this would be no problem. This wheel would just spin a bunch. But as you'll see, it spins a little bit, and then we'd pretty much just lock up. My transmission starts skipping. It's not going anywhere because this is locked up, and that wheel is on the ground. One other thing in this model that I thought was kind of interesting is that I tried to make the A, B, and C pillars all structural. So the roof has no other supports, it's only those pillars like in a real car, but all of them are strong. So this here is, well, not that strong, but tied right into the frame down there. This is tied into the frame. This is tied into the frame. So I can't quite lift it up by the roof because these come out. But other than that, like back here, no problem. That's not normal for my 1-to-8 cars. Usually it's just some axle connectors. So it was kind of fun to make that actually structural. So I guess for an overview of the electronics, I've got 9 motors on 8 channels. 6 of them are being controlled by my Mold King 6.0 unit. 2 of them are being controlled by a Chinese 2.4 gigahertz PF IR receiver, but not really, it's radio now, clone, which is being run off the Mold King controller. So the functions, in summary, are steering, shifting the 2-speed, shifting the 3+R, headlights up and down, drive, brakes, clutch, differential lock. So I'm pretty pleased with how the model turned out. I think it looks really cool. I think I have gotten a lot better at doing bodywork in the years since I built a 1-to-8 car. It's not perfect, and I don't know, people do it much better, but I'm pretty pleased with that part. The functionality was really fun. Got to do some stuff I hadn't done before, the fully transverse, joystick-operated manual transmission. Doing the super strut front suspension was interesting. Yeah, just playing with some of the new clutch gears, doing the central differential lock and clutch and all that was pretty fun. And yeah, it didn't function perfectly. The steering was flawed, and it doesn't drive in all gears, but that's kind of normal for my 1-to-8 cars. I built it for the experience of building it, and I think it looks pretty good and has some cool functions. So that makes me happy. Pleased with it.